At the September 24th council meeting, you requested a presentation on fiscal sustainability planning efforts and funding priorities if Measure M, the 3/4 cent local sales tax proposed on the November ballot, is successful. Much of this information was presented on July 23rd at the council meeting then, and tonight I'll recap that information and share more details about our continued fiscal accountability efforts. After several years of discussing the city's ongoing and systemic fiscal challenges, attempts to align revenue with expense and preserve service levels, continued actions to increase fiscal accountability, an in-depth review by the Marin County Civil Grand Jury, and significant community input, on July 23rd, you, the City Council, unanimously recommended a 3/4 cent local sales tax measure, now Measure M, be placed on the November 5th general election ballot. The measure allows Novato voters to decide if they want to preserve existing services and their quality of life. The ballot language shown on the slide here identifies services that would be preserved and outlines some of the oversight and accountability measures that would be enacted if a majority of Novato voters approve the measure. Ballot language is strictly regulated and includes a legal word count limit. So that means that everything you want to put into the ballot language just can't be there. Those limitations don't allow space for all the regulations to be listed in detail, so more details around transparency, oversight, and accountability are typically listed in the accompanying resolution and ordinance. In this case, with Measure M, in addition to the ballot language, Resolution 2024-071 and Ordinance 1717 provide more detail about public accountability. On this slide, I've highlighted some of the fiscal accountability, oversight, and review requirements if Measure M is approved. Funds will stay in Novato for Novato services. They can't be taken by the county, state, or other agencies. Sales tax does not apply to certain essential goods like groceries, prescription medications, medical and dental services, rent, or education services. An independent oversight committee will review annual use of the funds with a report to the public. Use of the funds are subject to audits by the city's independent auditors. All spending reports are available to the public to enhance transparency. And this also includes at year 10 and every 5 years thereafter, council review of the tax to consider whether it's still needed. If changes or elimination of the sales tax are recommended, the council would place a measure on the ballot for voters to consider the proposed change. If approved, Measure M is projected to generate over $10 million per year. The monies would be paid by anyone shopping in Novato, not just residents. So people coming from out of town to shop at Costco or Target or downtown at some of our DMBA folks left, at some of our downtown shops, or just stopping to buy gas would also pay the local sales tax, and those monies would support local services and infrastructure. Measure M would preserve those service areas the community has said are most important: police, parks, and potholes. Funding would be used to address deferred infrastructure needs like roads and streets, aging storm drains, parks and facilities, and preserve critical services like maintaining 911 response, recreation programs for seniors and youth and adults, and wildfire prevention efforts. So next I'll review some of our recent fiscal sustainability planning efforts. The council has been concerned about the need to improve the city's fiscal health and address the ongoing and growing systemic deficit for several years. The adopted 23-25 strategic plan outlines a number of efforts, including exploration of a local sales tax to address these concerns. The strategic plan also included an initiative to modernize the 2013 fiscal sustainability plan, including an interactive model. The model has been developed and is now available on the city's website for community use. While understanding the city's short-term fiscal outlook is necessary to develop a fiscal sustainability plan that's useful, if the plan is intended to be a document that serves as a guide for future fiscal and budgetary decision-making, several areas should be considered to ensure the city's overall long-term fiscal health. At a recent Finance Advisory Commission meeting, staff reviewed a fiscal health diagnostic tool with commissioners. This tool helps to identify specific areas that we recommend be covered in the fiscal sustainability plan. The tool was created by Michael Coleman, the principal fiscal policy advisor for Cal Cities, formerly League of California Cities. Mr. Coleman is considered the subject matter expert on California municipal finances. The tool poses in-depth questions about key financial areas that ultimately provide indicators about an agency's fiscal health. A state or local government is financially healthy if it can deliver the services its citizens expect with the resources its citizens provide now and in the future. Financial health is examined in 4 contexts as shown on this slide: cash solvency, budgetary solvency, long-run solvency, and service level solvency. After applying Novato's information, 13 of the 14 key areas, or 93%, fall into the warning or caution categories on this fiscal indicator. Staff is suggesting that consideration of these areas be included in the new fiscal sustainability plan. Next, I'll talk a little bit about the funding priorities, which reflect the areas the community has said are most important to them. If Measure M is approved by voters, staff recommends that the 5 areas below, shown on this slide, be considered as priority uses for the new revenue. Number 1, preserve current priority services. We first need to bridge our systemic operating deficit. This year's deficit is over $4 million. Next year, it's anticipated to drop slightly to about $3.3 million. Meeting the community's demand for services is critical, and this means adding back positions urgently needed to meet existing service level demands. Addressing the city's exceedingly high historic turnover to ensure services are delivered appropriately, and meaning compensating staff at a fair and competitive rate in order to retain them. Significantly below market employee pay and unrealistic workload expectations have led to an over 100% employee turnover rate in just 7 years. In fact, our police department lost 8 officers so far this year, with another 2 to 4 anticipated to leave by the end of the year. While we're planning ahead, the amount of time and costs to train new officers is significant. We're currently talking with the POA, the Police Officers Association, about the potential need to move to an emergency staffing schedule. This will ensure appropriate coverage throughout the city while new hires move through the training process. Number 2, replenish emergency reserves. The council reserve policy states that 15% of expense should be held in reserve for emergency situations. An earthquake or fire is an emergency. An unaddressed systemic deficit is not. We've been relying on these emergency monies to sustain services the past couple of years since the one-time monies that we previously had have been depleted. After stabilizing services, we need to go here to get our reserves back to appropriate levels to make sure they're available, not if, but when needed. Number 3, address mounting deferred infrastructure and capital needs. The city has over $55 million in identified infrastructure need. This need continues to increase as our ability to invest in our capital assets continues to decline. Through the various reports council's received over the past couple of years, you've heard that we aren't investing enough in our streets, our parks, our facilities, and our other infrastructure. We're just not maintaining it properly, and it's continuing to deteriorate. Our roads already have $38 million in deferred maintenance need, and we should be investing an additional $5 million more each year than we are now just to keep our roads in their current condition. That doesn't include improving them. Just this one area of need takes up half of the revenue projected by Measure M. Parks have $13 million in deferred capital need, which does not include growing routine maintenance needs like increasing tree trimming or pathway repairs. And just 3 of the city's most critical facilities, the Downtown Rec Center, Margaret Todd Hill Gym, and the police station, need over $4 million in repairs today. This doesn't include other city-owned facilities currently in use, like this building here, City Hall, the Corporation Yard, or the administration offices. 4th is mitigate financial and other liabilities. Like other cities, Novato has outstanding liabilities, both financial and risk management related. Prudent financial planning suggests that monies would be put aside and or invested to proactively mitigate these known liabilities. Things like continuing to invest in the 115 Pension Trust and the OPEB Trust to smooth future cost increases and alleviate the pressure on the general fund. Reviewing opportunities to pay down general fund debt to free up monies for ongoing services, and addressing known or anticipated safety concerns, whether traffic and street improvements, playgrounds, facilities, or other known risks. Without new revenue, we're not able to effectively address any of these areas. And fifth, invest in innovation to generate reliable ongoing revenue. We should be earmarking revenue to invest in city-owned properties to put the city in a position to more easily sell or lease properties at a higher value or less expensively improve them for other community uses. Invest in innovation tools or technology to improve efficiencies, thereby saving us money, or invest in other economic development efforts. We just don't have funds to do this now. With the 2012 state takeaway of redevelopment agencies and associated monies, the city lost substantial funding available to invest in improving and maintaining properties and engaging in other economic development efforts that would improve our long-term fiscal sustainability. For instance, the city recently purchased 501 Davidson. This purchase not only eliminated the need to find other, likely more costly corporation yard space, but also provided an opportunity to lease the bulk of the property, which will generate over $200,000 per year in ongoing lease revenue. In early July, the council received a report about Novato's general fund 5-year forecast. The forecast shows that without significant new ongoing revenue, the city will continue to run operating deficits in the $3 to $4 million range for the next 5 years. And by 26-27, just 2 years from now, there will not be reserves available to fund the operating deficit. I should also say, yes, this is a 5-year forecast, but you can see that black line continuing to go down, and there's no reason to think if there's not increased revenue that those little red boxes there would have any change whatsoever going forward. I also want to note in this forecast that these expense projections do not include any type of compensation change for employees. This assumption is obviously unrealistic if our goal is to retain our dedicated and hardworking staff and maintain quality services to the community. As staff, and probably as council, we often hear, "You've been running deficits for years. Why don't you just cut costs to balance the budget?" Well, this slide shows that we have, and we have been for decades. We've been working to preserve service levels as best we can and reduce and contain costs. 70% of our general fund operating budget is staff expense. Since 2002-03, over 20 years ago, we've eliminated over 30 staff positions. You can see by the graph here that in 2002 and 2003, the full-time staff count was 234, and today it's just 198. Despite our best efforts, this steady decline has impacted direct service delivery and frankly has led to severe internal efficiencies over the years. Two very visible examples to the community are finance operations and permit processing. As the council is focused on making these two particular operational areas priorities and has added back resources, staff, service levels have and are continuing to improve. So there's no reason to expect that with additional resources and more staff, we couldn't improve the existing level of service that we're providing to the community. The city's also tried to reduce costs in other ways, and those actions are catching up with us. As you heard in earlier presentations this year, less investment in streets, roads, facilities, and parks has led to a decline in conditions and increased safety concerns. This slide lists some of the other steps we've taken to address the city's fiscal challenges and find ways to fund service and infrastructure priorities. To move this discussion along, it's getting late. I'm not going to go into detail on these, but if you want more specifics, there's an attachment to this staff report that lists over 20 other staff reports and several other resources where you can read more. As shown on the prior slide, council's eliminated over 30 positions in the past 20 years to contain costs. Some of these other actions have included using one-time revenue from sale of property and American Rescue Plan Act monies to support ongoing operations operations rather than using emergency reserves. We've updated the city's fee schedule for user-based services to improve cost recovery and allow for annual CPI increases to continue to keep pace with costs. We've restructured service delivery models in several areas, like landscape maintenance, to retain quality and reduce ongoing expense. We've reviewed the internal service funds and adjusted rates to improve cost recovery after over a decade of no changes. Council authorized Measure Q, a 2% increase in TOT or hotel tax for voter consideration in November 2020. Staff at Council's direction has issued a request for quotes or information for professional real estate services to move toward best and highest use of city-owned properties. We've sold properties at Hamilton to generate one-time monies. The investment policy has been updated to improve the city's rate of return. And Council just tonight authorized a no loan policy to outside organizations. As you can see, many actions have already been taken to improve fiscal sustainability and the city's revenue outlook. If Measure M is not approved by voters, staff will return to the Council in early 25 with a menu of options to consider to further reduce ongoing costs. As always, all fiscal allocations would be decided by Council as part of the annual budget process. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you so much.